Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ben on Sports. I hope you all have enjoyed your weeks. We are going towards the weekend now. I know we just put out an episode, but we have another episode. This one is not football, as you can see. It's going to be another basketball episode, but it is not an NBA episode. That's right. We are in the best time of the year. We are about to hit college basketball season. It starts Monday, and because it's one of my favorite sports to watch personally, uh, March Madness might be the best postseason event in North American sports. And I really, really love Feast Week. We're not going to cover Feast Week extensively here. I do think we're going to do a Feast Week episode. For those of you who don't know what Feast Week is, it's the Saturday, it's the 2 weekends around Thanksgiving. It's the Thanksgiving week, and it's very famous in college basketball because there's all these early season tournaments where you get to see a lot of really good teams play each other. And it's a really good time to just sit down on TV and watch college basketball, have football on another screen. Really great time of year. Anyway, we're going to cover a lot of aspects about college basketball. We're going to start with the non-conference, go through some conference, go through the Big Five conferences, with the Pac-12 not being one. So it's no longer the Power Six. And then I'm going to go very quickly through some mid-major conferences. I'm actually going to get to every conference today. I don't think I'm going to talk talk too extensively about every conference. In fact, most of them, I think I'm going to go like rapid fire and just show you who I think is winning. And then we're going to talk about my current going into the season, my top 30, and who I think is going to win awards. So without further ado, let's get into the non-conference slate. I have picked here a selection of 20 non-conference games that I think are going to be the best non-conference games. I gave you dates, I gave you times, and as you can see at the bottom, all times are in Eastern time. That's just where I happen to live. So if you are Central Time Zone, take an hour off. If you are in Mountain, take 2 hours off. If you are on the West Coast, take 3 hours off. I'm pretty sure all of us in North America are used to Eastern and adding and subtracting time. If you're from Europe, good luck. I doubt you are, but just in case, let's cover all the bases. College basketball, highly recommend if you haven't watched it before. Anyway, that's enough about timing. So here we go. November 4th, first game of the year. Gonzaga home against Baylor. It's going to be a late one. It's a Monday night. Maybe if you get done watching Monday Night Football and you're still awake, throw on Gonzaga Baylor. It's going to be a battle between two top teams. It's going to be a good one. And I really, really respect these teams that play very early, like pre-Feast Week hard games against each other. I think in basketball, especially even more so than football, there's no excuse to have an easy non-conference schedule. It's proven it doesn't work for you. Well, most of the time it doesn't work. And I don't think it makes your team better. So I really hate it when I see these top teams, especially when they start getting ranked and we're talking about seeding and teams just don't play well or don't play a tough non-conference schedule, but they have a good record. It doesn't really mean as much to me. But here, I don't think I need to read all of them. I will say this. December 4th, that should be a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night. You have UConn Baylor. That's two top 5 teams. UConn has won the last 2 national championships. UNC Alabama. Alabama has had UNC's number. It's funny. Alabama, big football school. UNC, big basketball school. But in basketball, a couple years ago, Alabama beat UNC in Battle for Atlantis. It might have been Maui. Battle for Atlantis, I think. And 4 overtimes beat UNC. Then last year in the NCAA tournament, UNC was leading most of the game. They were never really dominating. It was close. It was a really, really good game. And then at the very end, Alabama came around to beat UNC, to take them out of the tournament. And then this offseason, UNC was trying to add a big in the transfer portal, trying to add a center, and Alabama took it. Alabama, also has been doing a little, I think after the NCAA tournament, threw a little bit of shade. So I think this December 4th slate is really good. I was just talking about UConn Baylor, UNC Alabama. I think there's some history there. I think that could be a really good game. It's in the Dean Dome in Chapel Hill. So UNC, this is going to be UNC's second non-tournament tough non-conference game only matched by Baylor to this point in the season in my mind. I guess Alabama, but Purdue I don't think is top 10 worthy this year. But UNC preseason number 1, they're playing Kansas. Preseason number 2, Alabama. So they're playing preseason number 1 and number 2. And there's a potential they play preseason number 3 in UConn. Moving on, we have Creighton and Kansas, the battle of the Midwest. Big East versus Big 12. Right at 8:30, 2 hours after UConn Baylor. It'll be late second half UNC Alabama. And then Duke Auburn. UNC Alabama and Duke Auburn are part of the ACC SEC Challenge. And then Creighton Kansas and UConn Baylor are part of the Big 12 Big East Challenge. Both of those, I think those are probably your 4 best conferences in college basketball this year. So you're really going to want to tune into those conference battles. I think that's a really cool thing about basketball is you have these challenges that guarantee you non-conference games. Obviously, they keep the top teams against each other, and if you're at the bottom of your conference, you play each other. But December 4th, I know it's a weeknight. People might have jobs. People might have school, whatever. Highly recommend staying up as late as you can because 6:30 and 8:30 and 7:15 and 9:15, really, really good matchups. You can sit there with, if you have 2 monitors, bring them out. And I highly recommend having a good basketball night. There's no NFL that night, so it should be open. Move to the second half here. We're getting into December, getting towards conference play. Some teams start conference play with how big they are first weekend of December. But Gonzaga, Kentucky, another good game. December, I don't think has as many. Later December doesn't have as many good options. It has some. But I think the only day that matches December 4th is December 14th. I think it has even more great matchups. That is a Saturday, so you might have to compete with college football. The NFL might be doing Saturday games by then. It might be a week later, but December 14th, that Saturday, Purdue versus Texas A&M. That's 2 teams that were good last year. They're borderline top 10. I think they're both on the outside. I have them both right on the outside. Arizona, UCLA Big 10 this year. I think they're truthfully in contention to win that conference. Arizona, new look in the Big 12. Louisville, Kentucky, that's an old school rivalry. Kentucky, the state of Kentucky loves basketball. Louisville is trying to get better here. Louisville, Kentucky, like I said, in-state rivalry. Those are usually pretty good. UConn, Gonzaga. That used to be battle of the mid-majors. I guess UConn's in the Big East now, so it's not. But that's 2 programs at smaller schools or schools, outside of his power conferences, or I should say football power conferences. So that ought to be interesting. UConn with another home game against a tough out-of-conference opponent. Alabama, Creighton, another good matchup. Creighton, another team not afraid to play a hard schedule. Alabama isn't either. And then we get to the next 2 Saturdays, both have some games. UNC versus UCLA. That's an exciting game. That's a battle of 2 blue blood programs. They've been around forever. They've been at the top of the sport for decades. I believe UCLA, the most national championships of all time. UNC, the 3rd most. They both have a ton of Final Fours. And they're both preseason top 25 coming in. This may not be like UConn and Gonzaga where they're both top 6, but they could be by then. I mean, who knows what it'll be a month and a half into the season, but UNC, UCLA, anytime 2 blue bloods get together, especially when they're both supposed to be good, it's an entertaining watch. That is part of the CBS Sports Classic, which is another fun event. We're going to talk a lot about Feast Week, but I'm not going to talk about some of the other multi-team events because they're not all tournaments and everything. But like the Champions Classic is actually on this list with Duke and Kentucky. And then the other 2 teams in the Champions Classic are Kansas and Michigan State. So it's these non-Feast Week events are also really interesting to keep an eye on because they offer a chance at some good non-conference matchups too. UNC, UCLA, the other 2 teams in the CBS Sports Classic will be Ohio State and Kentucky playing each other. December 21st, we have Auburn home against Purdue. And then Gonzaga versus UCLA. That the time is still to be determined, but it will be on December 28th. The other thing I would like to mention, there is one more event that I don't have listed on here, but I would keep an eye on for some good out-of-conference matchups. The Jumpman Classic, the Jordan schools. Everybody knows and loves Michael Jordan. The top 4 Jordan schools, both men's and women's, have been playing each other every year. It's been a very fun. It's not a tournament style, but it's been fun to watch. This is the 3rd year of the cycle, so this will complete the first go through of matchups. So it will be Florida versus UNC, which is a top 25 matchup, and then Michigan versus Oklahoma. Like I said, I didn't think they fit the bill because most of these are really good matchups, but it's another event I want you guys to keep your eye on, and it should be right around Christmas time. I don't have the exact date marked down in my notes for some reason, but it's right around the UNC UCLA time. Okay, so here you go. Take a picture of this, memorize it, whatever you want to do. But in my mind, these are the best 20 matchups, out of conference matchups. This is removing the Feast Week stuff because, like I said, we're going to do an episode on Feast Week. But if you're looking for just really good basketball with no particular team, I would try tuning into some of these matchups. Moving on to Feast Week. Here, I'm just going to give you the list of the best tournaments in my mind. And then later on in the month of November, when it gets closer to Thanksgiving and Feast Week, I will actually do an episode on these tournaments. But here you go. Maui was the best one last year. Had multiple top 5, multiple top 10 teams. This year, it's the same thing. Preseason number 3, UConn. Preseason number 5, Iowa State. Preseason number 9, UNC. Preseason number 11, Auburn. And so on and so forth. You know, Tom Izzo always has Michigan State ready to go. Good for Dayton for being in this in the A10. I wanted to shout them out. They actually have a really good non-conference schedule, especially for an A10 team. They play a lot of tough teams, and they're in the Maui. But here you can see a team like UConn getting more quality wins, Iowa State getting more quality wins. More on Iowa State later. They're going to need some quality wins in Maui or in a conference play. But UNC Auburn, like I said, I was mentioning a team like UNC. They play preseason number 1 and number 2. Well, depending on how this bracket breaks, they could play preseason number 3 in UConn and preseason number 5 in Iowa State. They already have preseason number 7 in Duke, so they could be playing a lot of really good teams this season. Again, I don't know how much weight you can always put in the preseason rankings because you haven't actually seen anybody play yet, but assuming they are accurate, again, a lot of good teams here. Definitely tune into the Maui Invitational during Feast Week. Battle for Atlantis, I feel like Maui and the Battle for Atlantis are always the top 2 tournaments. They always have good schools. They're the biggest tournaments for a reason. Definitely keep an eye on Battle for Atlantis. I don't think it has quite some of the star power. You have a Gonzaga, you have an Arizona, but I think, and they're both top 10 teams. But after that, I think it falls off a little bit. Indiana should be good this year. Louisville, everybody's saying they're going to be good. I think they can make a run at the tournament. I don't see them as a top 5 or 6 team in their conference, but they definitely have more talent and a new coach. But here you go, Battle for Atlantis. A lot of good teams there. It's a big tournament. Maui and Battle for Atlantis, like I said, they're usually the top 2. They're historically the top 2. I think they're the most successful Feast Week tournaments. Feels like Maui has gotten the better of Battle for Atlantis recently, but we'll see this year. Maybe Battle for Atlantis ends up being a better tournament. This is a new one starting this year at number 3, the Players Era Festival Impact Tournament. This is actually a tournament relating back to NIL where they want to reward players for playing, if I remember correctly. It's a very interesting concept. They already have it next year for 2025, and they have the 4 teams that are doing it. This one isn't as big, but it has really good teams. Alabama, Houston, both top 4 teams. Notre Dame is a big brand. Rutgers bringing in some big freshmen. So that's definitely going to be a really interesting one to watch. Obviously, you would assume this ends with Alabama playing Houston, but who knows? Again, not as big, not as many matchups, but really good teams. You're guaranteed to get some good non-conference games out of that. Another Bahamas tournament at number 4, Bahama Hoops Bahamas Championship. That's a long name. But again, I think this one could have pushed for 3 because I think it's, Baylor and Tennessee are good. And St. John's is better than Notre Dame, and then Virginia's there. But I think it lost a little bit of his allure when Tony Bennett retired from Virginia. I have no idea what to think of them this year. I was having a tough time projecting them anyway, but without Tony Bennett, you don't think that's going to make them better, losing a good head coach. But we'll see. I mean, there's some big brands in this. There's some good teams in this. So I would definitely keep an eye on it. Number 5, the Charleston Hoops Classic, which I think is growing in popularity as of late. A lot of good major teams in Miami, Oklahoma State. Maybe Oklahoma State doesn't have a great finish in their conference. I think Miami will do better in the ACC than Oklahoma State will in the Big 12. But Drake has had some good runs in the last couple of years. Florida Atlantic has had some good runs. They made a Final Four 2 years ago. Seton Hall with Shaheen Holloway is always fun to watch, even though they're replacing a lot. VCU secretly might be one of the best mid-major teams in the country this year. Vanderbilt, not great. Nevada out of the Mountain West has been good. So you have 8 teams. Obviously, with these preseason tournaments, they never get teams from the same conference. So if you see 8 teams, then it's from 8 different conferences. The Charleston Hoops Classic, I think, is trying to rival Maui and battle for Atlantis. They're just not quite getting the same level of teams. But it should still be fun and interesting to see where some of these mid-major conferences match up with some of the average major conferences. That's what I think would say is interesting to watch there. And you have some teams that could definitely be top 25 teams before it's all said and done. There's definitely going to be a tournament team coming out of Charleston. I'll say that. I think there might be multiple. The Rady's Children Invitational. Purdue, NC State, BYU, Ole Miss. This is 4 pretty big schools, 4 pretty popular schools. Ole Miss is right around the back end of the top 25. Purdue is in the middle of the top 25. BYU is a top 25. You can make an argument that they belong at 4 or 5. These kind of middle 3 here I all have close. And then NC State, I think, is the biggest question mark here. They're the only ones that aren't hanging around preseason rankings just because they lost so much of that fun team that made the Final Four last year that actually lost to Purdue in the tournament. So maybe some revenge there. Purdue did lose its best player, but they didn't lose as much as NC State. Anyway, keep an eye on this one. A lot of big brands, a lot of big schools, and a lot of schools that have had some recent success. ESPN Events Invitational. That is in Orlando. Minnesota, not a great major conference team. They do have somebody I think makes a charge for Big Ten first team, but outside of that, not much. Wichita State, not the same Wichita State, but still a good Wichita State team. Florida and Wake Forest, I think, are the 2 best teams in this tournament. I say tournament, but I feel weird saying that one's only 4 teams. But again, this is 3 major conference teams and a good Wichita State team that has some good history, even though Shaka Smart hasn't been there in a long time. And then the last one, the Legends Classic, honestly, this one might be good enough to jump to number 7. Syracuse, massive brand, new head coach in the second year. Texas, they're a top 25 team. Texas Tech, top 25 team. St. Joseph's, I know a lot of people are high on, and I think they'll be good, but I don't think they're going to be at the level of some of these other mid-majors. We'll see what happens, though. But yeah, so they were my best 8 of Feast Week. I was trying to not talk about them too lot in order to save everybody's time. I figured I'd just make 2 episodes or this one would be super long. But yes, best of Feast Week. Those are the top 8 tournaments in my eyes. I know you got NFL and college football, so keep them on one screen. And then I think you need to have 2 screens of college basketball minimum because that's what you're going to need to be able to successfully cover all these tournaments. All right, moving on. Let's get into our last little picture of non-conference. Here I have teams that we need to celebrate for how difficult their non-conference is, and I have teams that need to be shamed for how difficult their non-conference is. And for this, I'm not counting Feast Week. Everybody does Feast Week tournaments. I think part of your non-conference needs to be playing teams outside of your Feast Week tournaments, whatever it may be, and finding ways to play good teams. So here you go, teams that need to be celebrated, teams that you saw all over that non-conference list. Baylor, UConn, Gonzaga, UNC, Kansas, Duke, Auburn, Purdue. A lot of these teams are blue bloods. A lot of these teams have been really good the last 5 years. A lot of them have been good the last 10 years. You want to know why they're always good and at the top? Because they have a good non-conference. To be an elite team, to be consistently elite in college basketball, you can't shy away from playing good teams. And you look at the caliber of these 8 schools. Purdue is the lowest ranked coming into the season at number 14. Auburn is number 11, and the other 6 are all preseason top 10. That is for a reason. When you play good teams, it gives you better seating in the tournament. When you play good teams, it gets eyes on you. When you play good teams, it makes you better at the end. When you play good teams, ... The only way you hurt your team by playing good games is if you consistently year after year are losing every single one of those games. But most of these teams don't, and both of these teams have a lot of chances to prove how good they are. I'm not going to go specifically through each of their schedules just because we had a slide earlier, and obviously not all their non-conferences there. And I really want to commend some of these teams that are in really tough conferences and like Baylor that have to play a lot of top teams as it is. But yes, these 8 teams I think probably have the toughest 8 out of conference schedules. Creighton is right there. Creighton has a really difficult schedule, so I do want to mention them. They were almost made this list instead of Purdue. But these 8 teams need to be celebrated because they're not being little wusses. They're not chickening out of playing good teams. Sometimes it's a little bit easier in other college sports like football when you have 12 games and 8 of them are against your conference to not play anybody serious. You don't have that same opportunity in basketball. You're always going to have a couple of get-right games. You're always going to have like 3 to 5 games against teams that you should beat up to get yourself right. But other than that, there's no excuse, in my opinion, to not be scheduling really, really quality opponents. And these 8 teams have done it the best to me. Again, I would like to keep Creighton in there. They were very, very close 9. Teams that need to be shamed. I tried for teams that need to be shamed to make it teams that had some level of expectation because Boston College, I think, has like the worst Power 5 strength of schedule this year, or at least it appears like it. But do we really expect, as a college basketball community, do we really expect Boston College to do anything or be anywhere close to the NCAA tournament? Probably not. So for them, maybe it makes sense to play an easier non-conference schedule. And Minnesota, the only reason why they're not higher is because I don't think that Minnesota really has an opportunity to be even a contender in the Big Ten, really. But we'll get to that later. So Minnesota would be higher. I have them 8 because it is really, really bad. They're non-conference, but I don't think they're good enough where I would penalize them. But teams like Texas Tech and Iowa State's in a really, really good. I had them in the number 1 Feast Week tournament in Maui. They do not play a soul outside of that. And last year, Iowa State did the same thing. And they were a really good team. They were a 2 seed, made a good run in the NCAA tournament. My problem is you can't complain as a fan base if you don't play a tough out-of-conference schedule. Iowa State very well could have been a number 1 seed if they would have played somebody in the non-conference, but they didn't. So Iowa State's going to have to be nearly perfect in their conference to have a running at the 1 seed, and it's the toughest conference in college basketball. To me, it's just inexcusable. Iowa State has had a good couple of years. They've been building. They were a number 2 seed last year, and I know these matchups are sometimes made 2 or 3 years ahead of time, but and again, part of for Iowa, they play their out of conference in-state rival in Iowa, and Iowa just isn't good this year. But still, they couldn't have tried to put together anything last minute or anything last year when they were looking ahead and seeing this. Iowa State has to do better. I know they're going to have a lot of chances at quality wins, both in Maui and in conference play, but they needed something else to meet around the schedule out. Because for Iowa State, they want to be in the echelon of the teams that I have to be celebrated. But to get to that echelon, they need to have the out of conference that matches the teams they're trying to be. Maryland, I don't know if they're expecting to be a top 10 team, but Maryland used to be really fun in the ACC, and they really haven't done anything since they've gone to the Big Ten. It's what happens when you leave a better conference for a worse conference. And I mean, they still think they can be good. They do have a championship this century, but it was still over 20 years ago. Maryland playing an awful non-conference schedule. I think that part of that I don't think is on them. To be fair, I do believe they have Villanova scheduled. Normally Villanova would be a great out-of-conference game, and it's close by, but Villanova doesn't seem to be the Villanova of past. Indiana, awful non-conference schedule. No excuse for it. They want to be good. They think they're a blue blood. Indiana tries to insert themselves into the blue blood conversation all the time. Play a blue blood schedule. That's kind of how I feel about it. Miami, I think that they can make a run in the ACC. We'll see. Same with BYU. Miami and BYU could both make Sweet 16 runs, I think, but their out of conference schedule really is not that good. I think they both play one or two teams that are top 50, but they don't play anybody really top 10 or top 20 in my eyes. Michigan State, they do have one or two games, but outside of that, there's not a lot there. They don't have the amount of non-conference games that I feel like a Michigan State Tom Izzo coach team should have, and I've already talked about Minnesota. Sorry if that sounded preachy towards a couple of particular teams. I really do think Iowa State and Texas Tech and Miami and BYU have a chance. I just personally, as a college basketball fan, wanted to see them play a tougher schedule. But they're not, and we'll see how that plays out. Maybe Iowa State finishes higher than we thought they would because these other teams beat up on each other. Who knows? Wasn't trying to come at anybody there. Sometimes you get a little bit spirited talking about out of conference and non-conference schedules in basketball, but that's just kind of where I see the situation personally. So now we're going to get into previewing conferences. Fun fact, I did the Power 5. Remember, for basketball, the Pac-12 doesn't exist, not just for basketball, for everything. So the Power 5 is the four normal ones plus the Big East. And the order that I go through them is my power rankings. I have them listed 1 through 5. Wherever the order I do the conferences in is the conference is best to worst. So hopefully that makes sense. With that being said, the first team in the power rankings that we're going to cover, or the first conference in the power rankings that we're going to cover, is the Big 12. I think they're kind of unquestionably the leader. They have the most preseason top 10 teams, I believe, in the history of basketball. The history of the NCAA. I mean, it's only Houston, Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State, and Arizona. So that's only half. Anyway, so here is my power rankings. Here is where I see it playing out. Maybe more here is how I see the Big 12 standings playing out, not necessarily my power rankings, because I think Kansas might be better than Houston this year. Baylor can be in that conversation, but I just think the way the Big 12 is going to shake out this year after looking at everything, looking at schedules, I think Houston's going to win the conference again and move to 2-0 and winning the Big 12 conference since they joined it. But here you see Houston, Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State. I think that's your upper echelon. All four of those teams are top 6 preseason. I keep using that because I think for a lot of people that helps them understand how good a team can be, because I think teams are largely graded on how good they can be, not how good they are currently. But preseason rankings aren't everything. We've seen teams start preseason top 10 and then have a losing record. So that is possible. I'm just trying to help people contextualize. But I think Baylor, Kansas, and Houston, particularly, all three of them can be top 5 teams at the end of the country. All of them can and should be really good. I think Iowa State, those three are like 1A, and then Iowa State's 1B, and then we get to the Arizona tier. But truthfully, this top 7 is the best top 7 out of any conference. I think Colorado and Utah might be really bad. Oklahoma State could be bad. UCF could be bad. Arizona State, I wanted the Bobby Hurley experiment to work out in Arizona State, if I'm being honest, but it doesn't look like it is. West Virginia is rebuilding. But the top half of this conference is really good. And really, even the Kansas State and TCU, they both have good coaches that have made the NCAA tournament, won games in the NCAA tournament recently. But I think Kansas, Houston, Baylor are the top 3 that are going to separate themselves. I think Iowa State is almost locked into the 4 because I think Iowa State is clearly better than like the teams I have under them, but I think the teams above them are also better than them. One thing I really appreciate about Iowa State, best defensive team in the country, hands down, elite defensive team. The worry about them is, can they score? It's like, if they're the best defensive team, they're like in the 20s or 30s offensively. So they're not, but you have the other 3 teams in front of them are top 10 to 15 in both categories. So they can win games defensively and offensively. And I think that's why Iowa State lags a little bit behind, but I think their defense is going to win them a lot of games. I actually think Arizona isn't, Pac-12 it has not been good. And I think because that Arizona might not be ready for jumping up to the Big 12 for the first season. I know they have guys like Caleb Love who have done it, but I think Arizona takes a couple more losses than expected in conference play. And I think Texas Tech is used to this conference and they'll be right there. BYU had a good year last year. They're used to the conference. They're there. Cincinnati, I'm hoping we get some more Cincinnati action. I miss Mick Cronin Cincinnati. They had like a we don't give an F about anybody attitude, and I really, really like that. I think that's when Cincinnati is most successful. I think they have a good season. I talked about Kansas State and TCU and the rest of these teams, but this is how I see the Big 12 playing out. Again, I think right now they are the best conference in college basketball. They have the strength at the top, and they have depth through the middle of their conference. Big 12 ought to be fun to watch. I think that it has four really good horses and three excellent horses that are really going to no other conference I don't think can match up. I don't think any other conference has more than two really good national championship contending horses. If you get what I mean by horses. But I think the Big 12 also has the most title contenders. Houston, Kansas, and Baylor are definitive title contenders, and I think Arizona is right there. I think there's 9 or 10 true championship contenders, and I think this conference has three, definitely three, probably four. I think Arizona is maybe, I hope this makes sense. I think they're an Elite Eight Final Four contender. I do not think Arizona will be good enough for the championship, but I do think they can make a run almost there, and I do think that they're going to they could hurt some people in the tournament. Moving on for number 2. It's not a big conference, but it is elite, the Big East. UConn, even if this is bumped by UConn has won 2 consecutive national championships. They deserve the benefit of the doubt. They've been really good. And last year, the only conference that was routinely able to stand up to UConn was the Big East. Even some of the Big East teams that didn't make the tournament. Creighton and Marquette have been really good. They've been really good programs, especially the last decade plus, really. For Creighton, you think it goes back to Dougie McBuckets, Doug McDermott. For Marquette, they've been good. Shaka Smart seems to be a really good coach. They did lose some guys this year, namely Tyler Kolek, but I think Marquette's going to be fine. We're going to be talking about their best player a little bit later, and I think Marquette's going to be really good. I think that top 3 is really, really solid. I don't know if their top 2 is the second best in the country, but their top 3 is really, really good. And really, other than Georgetown and DePaul, all 9, I want to say all 9. Seton Hall worries me because they lost a lot on their roster. Shaheen Holloway essentially has an entirely new team. So I would definitely say 8 of these teams always have the potential to make the tournament. I don't think the Big East is getting 8 in. I think they track more to the 4 to 6 range. But Xavier back. I think Xavier's back this year. I think they're going to be good, make a run at the tournament. I love Providence. I loved them a little bit more when Cooley was there, but they're always a tough team. You don't like to go and play them in their home gym. St. John's got some guys in this year. They have a fun head coach in his second year, and purely based off of coaching, St. John's could make a run to second or third in their conference. I think it's going to be one more year before Pitino really has them running. But beware of St. John's. They're a big program in New York City, one of the meccas of basketball. They play in MSG, so I do not be surprised if St. John's has a good season. I feel bad for putting them at 6. I trust Xavier and Providence based off of their recent successes and their recent history, but St. John's could be back with the right man at the helm. Villanova, I think, is still rebuilding in the Kyle Neptune era. I don't think Villanova is. I think they maybe are a bubble team most of the year, but I don't know if they're going to make a deep run this year. If you're Villanova, you're hoping you can build on what Jay Wright did. You're hoping, yes, they won their first title in 85, but most of Villanova's basketball success was during Jay Wright. So you're hoping that you have developed a program and it wasn't just your coach, because that sometimes happens in college sports. Sometimes you don't have a program, you have a coach, and that coach keeps you competitive. Villanova is really hoping that's not them. Butler's a fun one when they get going. Obviously, the Brad Stevens, Gordon Hayward era is long gone, but Butler can still be good. They've made multiple tournaments even since then. They've had some really good seasons. I think they're going to be better this year. I think they're returning some good pieces. And Butler, just like St. John's, is a team where I have them 8, but do not be surprised if they make a run to the top 4, the top 5. I truthfully think 4 through 8 in the Big East can be in any order. I think they're all in the same tier. I think UConn is by themselves. I think Creighton and Marquette will be fighting for second and third. And then 4 through 8 on this list, I think, are all in a very similar tier and can all finish in any order. And then Seton Hall, I think, is kind of by themselves at 9 just because they have so much that left and so much new coming in. Holloway obviously can't be too bad of a coach. He took St. Peter's to an Elite Eight, beating Kentucky and Purdue, but it's always hard when you have that many new guys. And then Georgetown and DePaul are just two teams trying to rebuild. DePaul, brand new head coach. Georgetown has a second-year coach from in conference. It's still a mind-blowing move to me. But Georgetown and DePaul, I think, are still going to be rebuilding this year and won't be much of a threat. Moving on to my number 3 conference in the power rankings. The ACC. This might get me some hate from people because for whatever reason, the national media hates the ACC. In my opinion, they've turned on the ACC in the last 5 years. And for no apparent reason, you can say that they're not as good. But when you say that, I think you're really talking about the bottom. This is the first year of an 18-team ACC with Stanford, Cal, and SMU joining. But every single year, everyone's like, the ACC is not that good. And I will admit I'm giving the ACC a bump for this because I think it says something. Everybody always says the ACC isn't good anymore. Is the Mountain West better? If you truthfully believe the Mountain West is better than the ACC, you need help. You're just trying to get clicks online. I don't know what you're doing, but that is you're crazy if you legitimately think that. Like I said, the bottom of the ACC is not very good, but the ACC has a way of preparing teams for March. Everybody says the SEC is so good. The Big Ten is so good. They suck in March. The Big Ten has not won anything since 2000, 2001 with Tom Izzo. They haven't won anything. They choke all the time. The SEC outside of Kentucky and Billy Donovan, Florida, hasn't done a thing in March. Obviously, you're always going to have a team here or there that make a run. But you know what the ACC routinely does in March? Outperform both of those conferences that everybody shames them, and they outperform the Mountain West, who for some reason everybody's trying to say is better. I think the ACC is disrespected. I think they routinely get disrespected, and they are a good conference outside of Duke and UNC. Obviously, Duke and UNC, I think they're going to separate themselves from everybody. The ACC schedule does kind of suck because it's unbalanced, so you are going to get teams that have to play like at Duke or at UNC, and then don't have to play them at home because of the conference schedule. It just lends itself to some uneven scheduling. But at the end of the day, you have to play your schedule and beat the team on your schedule. Duke, UNC, I think are going to be 1 and 2 all year. I don't think anybody's is as good as Duke and UNC. I don't think anybody is busting into that echelon. But I will make the argument that Duke, UNC is the second best top of any conference. Obviously, the Big 12 has the best top, but Duke and UNC, I think, are in UConn's territory. Even if UConn is slightly better, I think they're in the same realm of teams. In the Big East, in Marquette and Creighton, neither one of those teams are as good as Duke or UNC. In the Big Ten and SEC, definitely don't have two teams. Well, the SEC might, but Duke and UNC, I think, are both really good. They always are. Not a whole lot to say about that. Wake Forest is a team that I don't know why the AP didn't rank them. I think it's this anti-ACC bias. They have 3 or 4 starters returning. They have first team All ACC returning, and Hunter Salas, former 5-star recruit, who Forbes, their head coach, does a phenomenal job of getting these guys through the transfer portal and turning them around. And then they have Efton Reed, a former 5-star who transferred in the Wake Forest last year. Didn't score a whole lot, but he was a big paint presence, and I think he's going to take an even further jump. Wake Forest always has shooters. Wake Forest, I think, is coming into the season, is the 3rd best team, and I think that they are a top 25 team. And, I think that they're kind of slept on. Same with Clemson and Miami. Clemson did lose some pieces, but I think Brad Brownell has done a really good job with them. They made the Elite Eight last year, so clearly Brownell can coach the team. They had a great start, and remember that Mountain West everybody was talking about last season? Clemson beat 2 of them by double digits, including beating one of them on the road. Clemson good team. They also beat UNC. They should have beaten Duke last year. Like, Clemson is a good team. They're not afraid of anybody, even with some of the pieces they lost. They're still going to be good. They still have quite a few important guys from that run. I think Ian Shefflin takes a step up this year for them. Miami is really good. They got some good freshmen. They got some good transfers. Jim Larrañaga seems to always have guards. Miami always has guards aplenty. It's going to come down to their bigs or how they play in the paint. Pitt, last couple of years, again, they're another team I think should have made the tournament last year. I think that Duke and North Carolina are a team or like their own group, and then I think Wake Forest to Pitt is all similar. I think Wake Forest should be the best out of them, but all those teams are kind of in that like 18 to 30 range when I'm looking at top teams, in my opinion. They all can be, I should say. I don't have all of them there right now, but I think they all can be. All of them have good coaches that have proven they can coach players well, proven they can beat good teams. And I think that all of them should make the tournament. I think the ACC should get 7 to 8 teams in this year. I know that that's a hot take compared to what they've done the last couple of years, but I think the ACC is going to do a little bit better. And I think the top teams will do better in out-of-conference play, which is going to help the teams, the conference as a whole. Louisville, I don't know if this is the year they break out or if it's next year, but it looks like that program is finally heading in the right direction after losing Pitino due to his scandal. Remember when Louisville first came to the ACC, they were routinely top 10, top 15. The mid-2000s or 2010s were really good for the ACC because of how many great teams were in it. Virginia, if there's any team here that I think could really bottom out and end up being a lot worse and finishing close towards the bottom, it's Virginia. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't have Tony Bennett, but where's the talent coming from? I think part of the reason why Tony Bennett left could be because he knew the team wasn't very good and he didn't know how to make it good in the current era of college sports. I could very well see a way this year where Virginia finishes 13, 14, 15. I'm trying to give them a little bit more respect. I think losing Tony Bennett hurts them. But I'm right now, I'm not inclined to say it hurts them that much, but it very well could. We'll know very quickly, I think, in the out-of-conference schedule for them. NC State, they're always in this region in the ACC. Even last year, they only made it because they won through the tournament. NC State plays some teams close. I think Kevin Keatts saved his job. He has not had a good tenure at NC State. Made it to the Final Four last year, won the ACC championship. I think that says a lot. They are replacing. I mean, almost their whole team is gone. So if you're NC State, you have to hope the new guys coming in are ready to go. And because they're replacing so much, I don't know if they can make the tournament again. Granted, they shouldn't have last year. And I think Kevin Keatts could have been fired last year if it wasn't for winning the ACC championship and making the Final Four. In the long run, that might be bad for NC State because I think that was just more of a right getting hot at the right time than it was Kevin Keatts is an upper tier coach. Georgia Tech, I think Georgia Tech has a chance to make a run at the top 6 or 7. I think Georgia Tech can make a tournament run if everything goes correct. They have a great new head coach with former NBA experience. I feel the same way about Notre Dame and Syracuse. I will say this. I think one of Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, or Syracuse, they all have new head coaches. They're all trying to build their own style of play. All of them had some good things that last year. I think one of those 3 teams, my hot take, I have them here. One of them is going to break into the top 6 or 7 and make a run at the NCAA tournament, if not multiple. Leonard Hamilton, you got to feel bad for him at Florida State. I think his time as a head coach might be coming to a close soon. And then the rest of these teams, I mean, SMU is going to be good. They might upset one of these middle-tier ACC teams, but I just don't think they're quite ready to compete at this level. And then the rest of these teams are rebuilding. None of them were very good last year. I really want Virginia Tech to be good. It's fun when they're good. I really like their head coach. But if he doesn't do well this year, he might be going. Rest of these schools are probably going to be really bad and some of the worst teams in the Power 5. And I think that's where it's going to kill the ACC, is that the bottom of this conference might be the worst bottom, and that's going to hurt some of their net ratings. Moving on to the 4th conference, I have the SEC. Alabama, I think 1 through 8 is pretty good. 1 through 9 or 10. The SEC has a bad bottom, though. Oklahoma and Vanderbilt don't look like they're going to be good. I don't think Missouri is very good. LSU, who knows what to make of them. But Alabama, national title contender. I've been talking about national title contenders. 4 in the Big 12. I think there's only 1 true national title contender in the Big East. 2 in the ACC. In the SEC, I see Alabama, Auburn, maybe A&M. I think you have a lot of like Elite 8, Sweet 16 teams in the SEC. I don't think you have a lot of title contenders. The SEC ought to be fun because I think 2 through 8 can finish in any order, really. There's a lot of good teams in the SEC. I don't know if there's a lot of great teams. I really like teams like A&M and Mississippi State after their tournaments last year. Even if Mississippi State did get beat, I think they're returning a lot. Kentucky is going to be interesting. How are they going to be with a new coach at the helm? How is Arkansas going to be with a new head coach? I don't think Musselman was bad, but Calipari can certainly recruit. How does Rick Barnes rebuild at Tennessee after losing Dalton Nett and somebody like Jonas Adu? SEC is going to be interesting to watch. I think you have a huge I can't say the word, and I'm trying to. I think you have a huge bunch of teams in like that are in the top and the middle that are all similar in talent and ability that can finish anywhere. I don't think the SEC. I mean, maybe they can. I think the most they can get in is 9. I think the lowest they get in is 6. It's like I said, it's hard projecting tournament until you see the out of conference, see how teams are stacking up with each other. But yes, I really, really like some of the senior returners for teams like A&M, for teams like Mississippi State. Kentucky has a lot of new pieces. Florida has some interesting pieces. They definitely have some good bigs. Tennessee, I think, is going to be interesting to watch. But I think the only thing I will say is I think if 11-16 in the SEC, I'm pretty confident that's going to be 11-16. The only team I think that can make a run there is South Carolina. Georgia, maybe. The bottom of the SEC is not very good either. And like I said, I think Alabama and Auburn are going to be 1 and 2. I think the state of Alabama is pretty good. And I think 3 through 8 are good. And I think 9 and 10 are decent. I'm very intrigued to see what happens with Calipari with the amount of money Arkansas has. Moving on to number 5 in the last conference, the Big Ten. Out of all these power conferences, they haven't won a championship in the longest period of time. I wonder why, because they're not very good. They're always overrated every single year. Half the time they forget football season ended and they're still playing football on the basketball court in a sense. And I have a hot take for the Big Ten. Obviously, Izzo is still at Michigan State. Indiana, I think Mike Woodson's fighting for his life. Illinois had a good year, lost a lot of guys. Purdue lost Zach Edey. They're still going to be good. But I think the newcomer, UCLA, I think Mick Cronin is a very good coach. Mick Cronin is he's a scrappy guy, and I really like to see him on the sidelines sometimes. And I think UCLA has enough talent because a lot of the other teams in the Big Ten are on a down year this year, where UCLA can very well come in and be the best team in the Big Ten. And I think that might be what happens. I really like UCLA in the Big Ten. If UCLA was in another conference, I wouldn't like them as much, but I really like UCLA in the Big Ten. I think UCLA, out of all the newcomers, is the newcomer that's going to have the most success. Obviously, as 2 through 8 are all old Big Ten schools. I will say a couple of things I want to keep an eye on here. I feel bad for Minnesota at 16. They're going to be really bad, but they have a really, really good player that could be a phenomenal contributor on so many teams. Dawson Garcia is a really, really good college basketball player. I think he's going to be first team all Big Ten. I think it sometimes is sad to see when you have a really good player and he just doesn't have a team around him to compete. Northwestern, really good last year, but they're losing their heart and soul. Boo Buie felt like he was everything to that program, and he's gone now, so I think they're going to crash and burn. Nebraska made a tournament last year for the first time in forever, and I think they have a good coach, but I don't think Nebraska is necessarily a basketball power, so I think it takes them more time to kind of rebuild and reload. A lot of these teams are similar, like Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan. They're all similar to me. Teams that have been and can be and usually are good, but are rebuilding or have a lot of new pieces coming in, and they're in like a transitionary phase. I'll tell you a team to keep an eye on, Rutgers. 2 massive freshmen coming in, 2 incredible freshmen that should be lottery picks whenever their time comes, probably the next NBA draft. It's sometimes worrisome to have a team led by freshmen. Most of the time, it's worrisome, especially early in the year. But I think Rutgers could make a run not just at the top 3 in the Big Ten, but at the Big Ten championship. It's going to take a lot going right for them. It's going to take their freshmen being good immediately. It's going to take the other pieces doing their job. But Rutgers has the talent to do it. I just don't know if I see it coalescing over some of these more senior teams. And that's why I have them at 7. But I think if any of these teams, if there's 2 teams, I think Ohio State, I don't think their ceiling is as high, but I think they're another similar team that can make a run. But I think the Big Ten is kind of wide open because there is no surefire top 10 team here. And that's part of the reason why I trust UCLA to come out of the pack. Okay. We have one more thing left for conferences reviews. I think there's some mid-majors we need to review, maybe some mid-major conferences. So I'm going to get into what I call the best of the rest. I'm going to rank what I think the top 10 mid-majors are coming into the year and the top 5 mid-major conferences. So here you go, the best of the rest. Gonzaga, I think that one's easy. I think they're far and away out of all these mid-major schools. They're the ones that have been able to figure out how to routinely establish themselves at the top. Boise State, the Mountain West is really good. For a mid-major, not better than the ACC. I hope you guys have, if there's one thing I want you to get out of this video, it's that. But Boise State's returning a lot. They look to be like they could be really good. St. Mary's, I think, has benefited a little bit from Gonzaga being there, but they also have just built a good program by themselves. Those are the 2 flagship schools of the West Coast Conference. I think Dayton is really good. They're playing a really good schedule. I have a lot of respect for Dayton. I think they could be a top 25 team pretty early into the year. I'm very interested to see what happens with them. The A10 the Mountain West and the West Coast Conference kind of have some teams that are always competitive. I think the A10 is the most true mid-major conference out of these. And they've proven they can get multiple teams in the NCAA tournament. And I think I would put them on alert for at least getting 2. Starting with Dayton. I wouldn't be surprised if Dayton's in my top 3 after a month of watching basketball. Memphis, I know it was an exhibition scrimmage in October, but I really, really liked what I saw them against North Carolina. They look to be a really athletic team. I don't know if anybody else was watching a college basketball exhibition on October 12th in the middle of the week, but I know I was. Again, I love college basketball. Maybe that's why, but Memphis looked good. Penny Hardaway's had a couple of good teams at Memphis that have been competitive. Nothing that's been like a top 4 seed worthy, but I do think he's a decent coach. I think he has a good staff with him, and he has a lot of really good transfer portal gets. A lot of those guys are experienced and talented, and that's going to help Memphis, I think, coalesce quicker and be good immediately. They are out of the American Athletic Conference. Grand Canyon, they might have the nation's leading scorer. We're going to have more on that later, but Grand Canyon is really, really good. I think they're going to win the Western Athletic Conference. Just running away this year. Honestly, if Grand Canyon continues to be at this same level of program, they might need to move up a level to the Mountain West, in my opinion. VCU, Nevada, my bad, I skipped that. Number 7, Nevada, Mountain West. Again, the Mountain West usually has some of the better mid-conference teams. Nevada's been good, especially recently. They're right there. Mountain West is always good. VCU, a team that got going with Shaka Smart. Obviously, Shaka Smart has now had multiple stops at Texas and now at Marquette. But VCU is good again. I don't know how much stock to take into this. I've talked a little bit about Virginia, but apparently in a secret scrimmage, they just utterly demolished Virginia. VCU could be really good. VCU could make a push towards the top 10. And I think Dayton and VCU could land the Atlantic 10. 2 bids to the NCAA tournament. It's going to take one of probably both of them having a good non-conference, but I think it's possible. And the A10 has some other teams that could challenge this list. Colorado State, another Mountain West school. They technically won a game in the NCAA tournament last year. I think if they would have been paired against anybody other than Virginia, they would not have won a game, but they kind of got the benefit of that first 4 scheduling with the 11-11 seed game. Then UNLV, another Mountain West school. Historically, they've had some really, really good teams. They still find a way to always be competitive. A lot of these Mountain West schools are very good at development and finding guys, and then they send them to the big conference schools. That's kind of what they've been the last couple of years. And I think a lot of them have some really good guys that they've had that are upperclassmen and have kind of seen it all. Here you go. Conference rankings. I have the Mountain West number 1 just because they have depth. They don't have the best. I don't even think they have the best 1-2. I think that goes to the WCC, the West Coast Conference. But the West Coast Conference has zero depth, in my opinion. The Mountain West has a lot of depth. They always have 5 or 6 teams that are in the running for the tournament, whether they should or not. So I'm going Mountain West, and then I'm going for the West Coast Conference because of the aforementioned reasons. They have Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and no other team can compete with that. Or no other conference can compete with that. The American Athletic Conference, they may only have one team on this list in Memphis, but the American Athletic Conference has a lot of big schools. They have a lot of their schools are a little bit more deeply pocketed because they have football. So like teams in the A10 and the MVC, some of them do have football, some of them don't, but it's FCS. I just think being FBS level football really, really helps the AAC because it gives them more funding. It gives them better resources. And I do think that they have some good teams. I mean, last year, they have FAU, who's made a lot of good tournament runs recently. They've been, I do believe they lost their head coach. USF, really, really good last year. Rest in peace to their head coach. I think he had a chance to be at a very big program within the next 10 years. He took Kennesaw State, turned them around in 1 year, had them win the ASUN. Then he goes to USF for 1 year, has a really good year at UCF. And he unfortunately passed away last month. So there's some other non-basketball things going on at USF, but I think they could be really good there in the AAC. Needless to say, the AAC outside of Memphis has some really good teams that I almost put on this list that'll be very good. Number 4, the A10. Like I said, they could be a dual bid conference. They have been before. They have Dayton and VCU on this list. Davidson is usually pretty good. Loyola Chicago is in the A10 now. They make some fun runs. We'll see what happens with them. And then the Missouri Valley Conference, the MVC, I think that they're always a good conference. They always have some interesting teams. They've had some, it's kind of unfortunate for them. They have some teams that have put together some really good 4 or 5 year runs and been good programs, and then they go and leave for another conference. Kind of like Wichita State. But yeah, I think the Missouri Valley Conference can be a very fun one to watch if you are not. I do think it is a step below these other 4, but I wanted 5 teams, so they got included. All right, next, I am not taking any argument. There is 31 Division I conferences. I have told you who I think is winning 5 of them because they were the Power 5 conferences that we covered. That means for the other 26, I'm going to go rapid fire right now through all 26 of them and tell you who I think is winning. And for most of them, that's all you're going to get. I have nothing else to say. I'm just going to tell you my winner, and you have to accept it as absolute truth because I said it. Just kidding. You can accept everything I say as absolute truth, but I don't know if I recommend that. So here we go. Without further ado, we are going to do in alphabetical order the rest of the 26 Division I conferences. So here we go. First up, American Athletic Conference, Memphis. America East, Vermont. They dominate that conference. ASUN, Lipscomb. They have the best returning players and should have won it last year. A10, Dayton. Talked about them already. Big Sky, Weber State. Bring back Weber States and upsets. They're very good at upsetting people in the tournament. Big South, High Point. Good last year, should be good this year. Big West, UC Irvine. I feel like they're always the winner out of the Big West. They're the only competitive team. Colonial Athletic Association winner. College of Charleston. Really good mid-major program. Conference USA, Louisiana Tech. Horizon winner, Northern Kentucky. Ivy League winner, the ones from New Jersey, Princeton. The MAC, or the Mid-American Athletic Conference. That's not officially the MAC. Iona. This is MAC. Ohio's winning the actual MAC, the fun one with MACtion. The MEAC, North Carolina Central. I do want to give them a shout out because they have the best name in college basketball. They are officially the winners of the best name in college basketball this season. And it's why I'm picking them, because they're good and he's going to be the best player. His name, the best name, Po Boy King. What a phenomenal name. Shout out to North Carolina Central. You're going to win the MEAC. Mountain West Conference, the New Mexico Lobos, which is funny because I know I didn't have them in my top 10 mid-major conference rankings, but I think New Mexico as a team is going to win that and very quickly make my top 10. Missouri Valley Conference, Bradley. Northeast Conference, repeat champs, Wagner. Ohio Valley Conference, Morehead State. They're going to win it again, and they're actually going to win a game in the tournament this year. Patriot League, American University. Let's give the DC boys what they want, since Georgetown isn't. Southern Conference winner, Wofford. One of my favorite logos, one of my favorite teams, mid-major teams. I love it when Wofford is good. Southland, McNeese State. Hopefully this year they don't choke in the tournament, although maybe they deserve it for hiring the head coach they did. Summit League winner, North Dakota State University. Sunbelt, JMU, put them in the ACC. They'd be better in football and basketball than half the schools in there already. SWAC, Jackson State University. Dion isn't there anymore, but that doesn't mean the fun has to stop. Western Athletic Conference, Grand Canyon University, not even close. West Conference winner, Gonzaga, they're the best team by far. Woo! We made it through, guys, and now we are to my start of season power rankings and award races. I hope you enjoyed me quickly flipping through. You now have my conference winners for all 31 conferences. We'll be lucky if 20 of them are right, obviously, but anyway. I know you guys can read some of this stuff before I say it, so just hang with me here for all of my explanations. We're going to start with my start of season power rankings. I'm going to start with UConn at number 1. I know I don't care where they are in the AP poll. Excuse me. UConn, you're starting number 1. You've won back-to-back national championships. Danny Hurley is a psychopath of a head coach, but it works. They deserve to be number 1 until further notice. Alabama and Kansas, everybody knows they're good. Alabama might have 2 of the best teams in the nation on one team. They have such a deep, incredible bench. Kansas and Houston are always here. I feel like the last couple of years. Baylor, really, really good freshman coming in, adding to a deep, experienced team. Edgecombe might end up, if there's anybody that can challenge Cooper Flagg, especially on a good team, it might be Edgecombe. Gonzaga, they're Gonzaga. Duke and UNC, I think, are both really good this year. The only thing, UNC is going to have the best rotation of guards and in the best backcourt rotation in the country. The question for them is about paint protection and rebounding. Duke, Cooper Flagg. Duke has an incredible freshman class coming in, a really, really good freshman class. They have a couple of good vets left. For Duke, it's going to be about how fast can the talent coalesce, and can it coalesce before they all go to the NBA. Iowa State, I don't know if I actually think you're this bad. I'm just really excited about some of these other teams. Maybe I'm penalizing you for not a good out-of-conference, but I said you guys have the best defense. Iowa State can beat anybody because they can stop anybody. That's how good their defense is. I think Iowa State might be the best defensive team in the country this year, and it might not even be close. Those Iowa State-Houston matchups in the Big 12 this year, if you want to watch knockdown, drag out 50-50 games, that is your game. Houston and Iowa State. Again, I feel bad for putting Iowa State at 9 because they're honestly, maybe I should swap Gonzaga and Iowa State. Excuse me, now that I think about it, because I think Iowa State is better than Gonzaga. I think Duke and UNC are kind of the same level of Iowa State. Maybe I would flip Gonzaga, Iowa State if I threw it again. But again, I think that 5 through 9 are kind of are the 1B tier, and 1 through 4 are the A tier. And I think that 1 through 9 are your championship contenders coming into the season. Maybe somebody joins, maybe they don't. Have Arizona hanging out at 10. And then I have have 3 SEC teams that I said I don't think are contenders, but I think that they're good teams. They're just not great. Texas A&M, really, really like Wade Taylor from Texas A&M. Think he's one of the most dynamite microwave scorers in the league, or in the country, definitely in the SEC. Tennessee, rebuilding, they might drop a little bit depending on how fast their team comes together, depending on who fills in the shoes of Dalton Knecht. Auburn, Johnny Broome, enough said. Creighton, Ryan Kalkbrenner, enough said. Purdue, how do they replace Zach Edey? That is the top half. 16 through 30. Arkansas, John Calipari is going to get it figured out eventually. He's the used car salesman of coaches. He's great at recruiting you and giving you money and getting you to come and giving you the deal that you want. I don't think he's always great at making in-game adjustments. X's and O's, I think sometimes Calipari can be hurt, but he's great at getting recruits and getting them to the NBA. Marquette, They've been routinely top 20, top 25, especially under Shaka Smart. Indiana, they weren't good last year. They haven't been good or in the last couple of years, but I think they have enough talent through the transfer portal and through freshmen to be good this year. I also think Mike Woodson knows he's on the hot seat, so he has to do something this year. Texas is the same Texas it was last year, I think. Cincinnati is going to be Cincinnati. They're top 20. They might be top 15. UCLA, my Big Ten champs. It's kind of funny I have them behind Purdue, but I think Purdue has more chances in the non-conference, and I think once they get in the conference, UCLA figures it out. Kentucky, first year Mark Pope. I think first year with a new head coach for Kentucky is going to hurt them a little bit. Kentucky is still going to Kentucky, but they don't have as much talent as they did under Calipari. A little bit more seniority. We'll see what happens with Kentucky. It's almost a completely new team. Rutgers, led by the two top five-star freshmen. Rutgers is going to be depending on them for a lot. They could be very, very good, especially Ace Bailey. Florida, interesting team. I think that they're tournament worthy this year. I'm very interested to see what comes out of their 7'6" center. I don't know if he's going to be starting for them. I don't think he should be. But Florida has some good pieces. They should be hanging around. I've talked about Wake Forest a little bit. I think they're a little bit disrespected. I think it's a joke they weren't ranked in the preseason top 25. They're clearly the ACC's third best team, and I have them at 25. Ole Miss, 26. Illinois, 27. They're kind of similar teams to me on maybe not in play style, but in terms of having a little bit of reloading, also having some pieces left over. I think Ole Miss might start fast again this year, but I don't think they slow down as much as they did last year. Texas Tech, they're a little bit penalized, I think, in this. I think Texas Tech could be a top 20 team before this is all said and done. But again, I'm penalizing them for a week out of conference schedule. Maybe I shouldn't be holding as much of a vendetta, but I do think Texas Tech will finish better than they're starting. Kansas State, love their head coach, and I don't think he's ever going to let the bottom drop out of the program. Miami, I have them at number 30. Talked about them. I think they have enough talent, and Jim Larrañaga is very good at coaching up guards. Let's get into the award races. The Defensive Player of the Year, I'm giving you the nickname and the actual award here. I'm not going to do every single award because there's so many awards in college. I'm just doing the ones that I like the most. Defensive Player of the Year, Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's absolutely destroys people in the paint, deletes them at the rim. I think we could see a big win Defensive Player of the Year this year, although Iowa State has some good candidates, so does Houston. Freshman of the Year, it has to be Cooper Flagg, right? I mean, part of this, in my opinion, of winning these awards is also the media and how they cover you, what the storyline was preseason. I don't think you can win these awards unless you have some type of media backing coming into the season. And boy, Cooper Flagg is one of the most hyped freshman prospects in a super long time. He was with Team USA all summer. I think that's going to help him out. I think Cooper Flagg wins this one, and I don't know if he has a lot of competition for it. I truthfully think the only freshman that has any chance whatsoever at catching him is Ace Bailey from Rutgers. Best point guard. This is a tough race. There's a lot of point guards, and my problem with best point guard and best shooting guard is there's a lot of combo guards who do both, like RJ Davis, like Mark Sears. But I think RJ Davis wins best point guard. I talked about Ace Bailey. I think Sears is better than Bailey, but I think they're going to view Sears as a point guard. Ace Bailey wins best shooting guard. Cooper Flagg wins best small forward. Johnny Broome, I mentioned him when we talked about Auburn earlier. Really, really good player, top 5 or 6 player in the nation. He's incredibly good, and he's going to win best power forward. And I talked about Ryan Kalkbrenner. Not only do I think he wins Defensive Player of the Year, I think he can win the best center award, especially because a lot of the great centers have graduated over the last 2 or 3 years. You think a guy like Drew Timme, Armando Bacot, Zach Edey, they were all really good centers who were in the sport for a long time. Oscar Tshiebwe graduated 2 years ago, and all these are players Ryan Kalkbrenner had been competing against for best center. They no longer are. Third team All-American, AJ Storr, transferring from Wisconsin to Kansas. He's an elite scorer. He's going to be on a team surrounded by other elite players. He's going to be on a team that finishes in the top 5. Going to do a lot for him. LJ Cryer of Houston, I think he's another guy that can make a run for Defensive Player of the Year. He's going to be the best player on a really good team. That always usually lands you on All-American list. Zakai Ziegler, I think he is going to be the guy that has the biggest step up for Tennessee, and I think he needs to if they're going to be as good as they want to be, because I do think there's a chance Tennessee doesn't get a step up from enough guys and they fall out completely. Graham, Ike Graham Ike of Gonzaga. He's a big. Gonzaga bigs usually play well. I think he's another guy that's gonna be due for a huge step. Gonzaga feels like they take guys you've never heard of before and turn them into really good players, and I think this is no exception here. Tyon Grant Foster. There's always at least one mid-major player, or at least one. I'm not counting Gonzaga as mid-major in this argument because of how long they've been a top 10 team. But Tyon Grant Foster out of Grand Canyon might lead the entire nation in scoring across all 31 conferences. A phenomenal scorer. He stayed at Grand Canyon, and I think there's always at least one player like that makes the All-America list, and I think it's him this year. Second team All-American, Caleb Love. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. 5th year senior, great career, couple deep runs in the NCAA tournament. Self-explanatory. Cam Jones. Anybody know where Cam Jones is from? No. Marquette. Without Tyler Kolek, I think he's actually going to score more. The ball's going to be in his hands more. I think he's a great scorer. I think he's going to lead Marquette to a Sweet 16 this year. Wade Taylor the fourth out of Texas. A&M. You heard him mentioned. He might be one of the 2 or 3 best players in the SEC. I wasn't going to say the best, but Mark Sears, I think, fits that bill. I think Taylor could very well lead the SEC in scoring, though. He's a fun, exciting player. When he gets hot, he gets super hot, and he could lead Texas A&M. I really, really like Texas A&M this year. I think Auburn is a better overall team, but I think A&M, out of all the teams in the SEC, has the second best chance at making a Final Four run over Auburn. We then get to Johnny Broome, who we mentioned in some previous awards, the Karl Malone Award for the best power forward. Again, I think he can also be first team All-American. It's very tough to project where they fall because not all of these guys are positioned. Like, we have a lot more guards that I think are going to finish as All-Americans as bigs. And like, we might have a situation at some point this year where all 5 guys on an All-American team are guards. But Johnny Broome, I think, can make first team All-American. Out of all these guys on this list, I think he's the one best suited to do so. But for now, I'm going to leave him second team All-American. Again, he's the best power forward in the entire nation, and he's going to prove it this year. Alex Karaban, probably the biggest remaining piece left on UConn after almost their whole national championship. At least most of their national championship team is gone. Karaban is going to be the team leader. He's going to be the guy this year. He's going to be a scorer. Dan Hurley put some nice pieces around him, and I think that's going to help him out. Again, UConn prime for another deep run. Hurley has been a great coach, and I think Karaban benefits from all that and finds himself on second team All-American. Now we're to first team All-American. RJ Davis. I think his numbers dip a little bit because I don't think he has to be the main scorer, and I think he's going to be the guy teams take away. He's still going to be phenomenal. I still think he shoots 40% plus from 3, and I think the team around him might be even better, which might give him a boost in these All-American team rankings. Mark Sears, phenomenal player. We've mentioned him. Cooper Flagg, we mentioned. Hunter Dickinson, another guy that's been in college forever, just like RJ Davis. He's going to be pushing Kalkbrenner for the best center. And Kansas should be better this year. I mean, AJ Storr and Hunter Dickinson is a heck of a 1-2 punch. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner for the aforementioned reasons. That's right. I actually have 2 guards, a small forward, and 2 centers on my first team All-American. National Player of the Year. I think it would be funny for Mark Sears to win it if he doesn't win best at his position. But I truthfully think Mark Sears is a perfect combo guard, and I just have so much trouble projecting if he's going to be point guard or shooting guard. If he's shooting guard, I think he definitely beats Ace Bailey. If he's point guard, then I think much like I have the National Player of the Year race, I think RJ Davis and Mark Sears are battling for that all season, and I think Cooper Flagg is right there in National Player of the Year rankings as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out. Sorry that this is the longest episode. I really even cut some stuff out. Like I said, I'm going to have a Feast Week episode specifically. I cut some stuff out because I didn't want this to be too long. Congratulations if you listen to this whole thing. You have listened to the first episode of Ben on Sports that has been an hour or more. Thank you for sticking by and listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It does wonders. Comment down who you think your National Player of the Year. Comment down who you think. There's so much we had to cover because college basketball is such a massive sport with so much going on. Comment down below who you think are your predictions, who you think might win the national championship, the best conferences in your mind, the best players. There's so much we talked about. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. I love hearing other people's thoughts and opinions about it. Come follow me on X. We're definitely going to be tweeting a little bit more with the holiday season rolling around. I have a little bit more free time. So the X hopefully should be a little bit more active, especially as football season gets into the towards the playoffs, and college basketball and college football are still going. So come out, talk on X. Once again, thank you for listening to the longest episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you're as excited for college basketball season as I am. Everybody, have a good week. Until next episode, peace out.